Good afternoon and welcome to BBOC Live, presented by DraftKings. This is the College Football National Championship betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me today are my fellow BBOC co-hosts, Mike Calabrese and the one and only Josh Nunn, aka Duck. Colin has been banned from the show after guaranteeing Oregon would cover against Indiana. Completely kidding. Colin is traveling. Hope all is well. Colin, enjoy the game tonight. We also will be joined in a bit by none other than our prop guru, Sean Koerner, who will give a couple of his favorite props, including an anytime touchdown score and a bonus punter prop. You know, you always have to follow the punter props from Mr. Koerner. We will get into our game picks in just a moment. We will also share our favorite props and we'll put together a same game parlay at the end on DraftKings. And if you want to follow along with that or any of our bets, we will be dropping quick slip links in the YouTube chat. You can use those to quickly and easily load them into your bet slip and follow along if you so choose to do so. So let's get in. Well, actually, before we get into the game, does it feel, how would you solve the college football calendar? Right? It feels like the buzz gets kind of lost with 2 rounds of the NFL playoffs, the game on Monday night, but I get that college football doesn't want to go head to head with the NFL. What would you do to kind of solve this, or do you think it's not an issue? Duck, I'll start with you. Would you play it on like Friday night, or just say F it and play it Saturday some point, or do you think it's fine as it is?
I mean, I stand in the minority. I think it's fine as it is. After tonight, we're going to have to wait 222 days for another college football game. The season is already as short as ever. I don't think we need to condense the playoff format to get these games over with in any more of like an expeditious fashion than what some people have gone on social media saying that needs to be done. I think the calendar's fine. I'm juiced for it. You're going to have a little bit less buzz as the field gets truncated down because there are only two fan bases that are really, really passionately excited about this as opposed to 12 when the whole thing started. But I don't know. I'm in the minority. I think the calendar is fine and must-watch television at 7:30. I wouldn't be anywhere else.
I am happy that it's starting at 7:30 and we don't have to wait. Well, I think maybe 7:50 is probably when it kicks. I don't know. Is it? I never know when the actual kick time is. But yeah, it's not going to start at like 9:15 at least. Next year, the national title, it's going to be a week later. It'll be January 25th or 26th, I believe, in 2027. Calabrese, are you fine with the calendar, or would you change anything?
Just bump it up. I think everyone's just dying for football in August anyway, and we're turning to the last week of NFL preseason to kind of satiate that need. I think if you moved it a week early or just had a full-fledged opening week instead of a week zero appetizer, everyone's happier. I think college football was at its best when it was ending on New Year's Day, or at worst, pushing it to January 3rd, somewhere like that. The one thing I will say, though, people complaining about the distance in terms of days between the last time these teams played. One benefit is these teams are mainly healthy. And I think that is something that can kind of ruin the game of football, where it's such a physical sport. You don't want it just purely to be attrition and the deepest teams always winning. I like the fact that we're going to have about 95% of the star players in this game. So at least that's a benefit.
All right, well, let's get into the game. We have Indiana, who has just destroyed teams en route to the national title, taking on Miami. Many did not expect to be here. Miami has taken a bit of money over the past day or two. I think you could find some juiced sevens out there. Total has also ticked down. I believe most of the 47s have now been wiped out. This game will take place in Miami. I'm curious to see what will the crowd split be like. This is the all-in year for Indiana, who has the largest alumni base of any school in the country. I got to imagine there's going to be a ton of Indiana fans there. What is the split going to be like? what is the home field advantage you assign to Miami here in Miami in their home stadium? I'm not sure. I don't think it's a full home field advantage, but this is a pretty unique situation. Calabrese, curious to see. You've been red hot. You haven't lost a playoff bet yet. 11 and 0 or 10 and 0?
10 and 0, fingers
Well,
crossed for
hopefully
11.
going for 11 and 0. What is lucky number 11?
All right, so I'm under 47 and a half. As you mentioned, it's down to 46 and a half. Still going to take it. And it's because Miami has continually been slow out of the starting blocks. You look all the way back to late November when they needed to blow out Pitt just to impress the playoff committee to get into this field in the first place. They still only scored 3 points in the first quarter of that game. They've scored all of six first quarter points across their last four. And, obviously you can't win an under in the first quarter, but you can certainly lose one. So I don't think we're going to see explosive plays from the Canes against a really buttoned up Indiana defense that does not give up a ton of explosives. Miami famously really struggles to create explosives on the ground, 133rd in rush EPA. And then these two quarterbacks, I think they're just going to be under fire in this game. Mendoza did not handle that well in games against Ohio State and Iowa when he was heated up. Once you get to double digit pressures, he starts to shrink a little bit and this offensive ceiling comes down. And then when it comes to the Indiana pass rush, unfortunately, Daly gets hurt, in that Big Ten title game, and we had some thoughts perhaps the Indiana pass rush would take a step back. That hasn't really been the case. Against talent-rich teams like Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon, they've racked up 11 sacks. That resulted in negative 48 yards for those opposing quarterbacks. So I think Miami's going to be behind the sticks multiple times in this game. And then the final piece, the reason why I really love this for a full game under as opposed to a first quarter or first half, is both of these coaching staffs have shown acumen in the locker room at halftime, really coaching up their guys, figuring out how to take away strengths in the second half. It's been Indiana's calling card all season long. In the final 30 minutes of games this season, they've allowed just 5.2 points per game, which is first in the entire country. And Corey Heatherman, the DC for the Hurricanes, has really come on strong in the third quarters with his play calling. They've only allowed 2.9 points per game in the third quarter. So I think this is going to be an absolute war. I think it's going to be a one possession game in the end. And I'm hoping that the point that it's ticked down doesn't cost me, but I'm going to go under 46 and a half.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I also would like Indiana at a flat 7, but I think as of right now, the under is the best look in this game. I think it's going to be a slow-paced game. I think both defenses will excel in the red zone. Both are excellent inside of the 20. The way to beat this Indiana defense, which is aggressive, is to hit explosives. This is a Miami offense that's not elite in that department, and I think both defensive lines can control the line of scrimmage. The Indiana pressure packages, their blitz packages on known obvious passing situations are so good. And Beck is so bad under pressure that I think he's going to struggle on third downs. And I just don't think Miami will be able to consistently get into third and short. I think they'll have some success running the ball, keep that clock moving, but I don't think that they'll be able to consistently stay in third and short, third and medium. And that's when they're going to get in trouble. And that's what's going to lead to punts and what I think is going to be a field position battle. And on the other side, I do think that Miami's defense can get pressure. Indiana's offensive line doesn't get talked about enough. It's one of the biggest difference between, besides quarterback, this year's team and last year's team. They're much better in the trenches, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. Smith has developed into an elite left tackle. You have Evans, who's healthy at left guard. You got to remember, at the end of the year, he was hurt. He wasn't in there when they played the big boys. They've upgraded at center with Coogan, but that right side of the offensive line is still a bit vulnerable. And I think Miami can take advantage, get to Mendoza a couple times to kill drives. So I think this plays out more like Indiana, Ohio State, maybe not that low scoring, but maybe Indiana, Iowa, as opposed to the Indiana Oregon game. I know that's fresh in everyone's mind, but Oregon just gifted away points to Indiana and just changed the entire complexion of that game. But these are two teams that are not fast. I think the clock will be running throughout, and I think the defenses will control the line of scrimmage. So I'll roll with you on the under. Duck, you're going with a side here. You like the Hoosiers.
I do, and I lean under as well. I think it's going to be a slower pace game, specifically the first quarter and first half. But to speak on Indiana's offensive line, they rank sixth per PFF in run blocking, 14th in pass blocking, and they've really been able to protect Mendoza. The Miami defensive line in their pass rush is legitimate. They led FBS in sacks with 47. They were seventh in tackles for loss. but they did struggle at times against Ole Miss in getting to Trinidad Chambliss and getting him on the ground. They did have some pressures, but they were not able to sack him as much as what you'd think. They dropped some interceptions, and the result was Ole Miss being able to score a ton of points when they needed to be able to have a chance to win that game. I just don't know that Miami's defensive line is going to have the sort of impact that they had the second half of the regular season. I think they'll get close, but I think Mendoza under pressure will be able to get the ball out of his hands, and Indiana's playmaking receivers, all three of them, will be able to make plays. Aside from that, you're looking to try to find these small differences and advantages either way in a game between two exceptional football teams. So I'm looking at the discipline discrepancy. Miami was the had the fifth most accepted penalties against them in FBS. Indiana 10th fewest. There's a big special teams advantage for Indiana. I think they're better coached. I lean on their red zone defense, which has been the most consistent performing unit in FBS this season. They are just elite when their opposition gets inside the 20-yard line. I think Miami will be kicking field goals in this game. Indiana will score touchdowns. I think they get the knockout punch at the very end to win this game by 10 points.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it with Indiana. I mean, they are just execution and efficiency monsters, and they don't do anything to beat themselves, right? You look at penalties, giveaways, all the third down statistics, but all those little things that don't necessarily show up in the surface box score, they are elite at. Miami, not so much, can be undisciplined at times. I think they're outside the top 100 in penalties. That could end up being the difference in this game. Also, in-game management, I think advantage to Indiana with Cignetti over Cristobal. Although Cignetti does the one critique of him that I can offer. Who am I to critique Cignetti? But he does use his timeout. He does just use his timeouts like willy-nilly sometimes early in games. So maybe that costs them a possession for the under. But that could end up being the difference in this game. And if this comes down to a pressure game, it's clear that Mendoza is far superior under pressure than Beck, and that could also end up being the difference. So I agree with you on Indiana, especially at 7. But before we move to our props, I'll throw it to a slightly younger version of myself for a word from our sponsor, DraftKings. The Big Bets on Campus podcast is sponsored by DraftKings Sportsbook, and in partnership with DraftKings, our listeners get a great offer. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 back in bonus bets if your bet wins. The next great touchdown is coming, and you can bet on it. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all of the fun with DraftKings Pick 6 and have the shot to win cash prizes. To get started, use promo code BBOC when signing up at DraftKings. Again, use code BBOC when signing up and bet $5 to get 300 back in bonus bets if your bet wins. The crown is yours. All right, before we bring in Sean to discuss his favorite props, we will discuss ours. Calabrese, I will throw it to you. What's on your radar?
So you talked a lot about Carson Beck not being able to handle pressure, and you can take him to hit negative rushing yards or 0 would also cash in this case. And it's important because the enduring image of Beck was running in for the game-winning touchdown against Ole Miss, having a game where he showed off a little bit more of his legs. He still finished with -6 rushing yards against the Rebels. He's finished 7 games this season with negative rushing totals, and 9 of his 15 starts, he's finished below 3.5 rushing yards. I mentioned the Indiana front being able to get after quarterbacks, and he has just been so shaky under pressure. And there's just not that big of a sample size for him in terms of dropbacks this year. But when you look at it, sub 50% completion, 6.5% of his throws were turnover-worthy plays. And he's also a bit of a gambler. He does chuck it downfield at 14.4 ADOT when under pressure. All of those things, by the way, I still think Cristobal and Shannon Dawson as OC are going to be in his ear. Do not throw this game away as he did earlier this season when he had 4 interceptions in a loss. So I think there are going to be opportunities for him to just eat the football. And if he's sacked 3 or even 4 times in this game, I just don't see how he makes the math work on the other side of it because he need 20, 25 positive rushing yards to get back up that mountain to cross over into the positive threshold. I don't see it. So I'm willing to lay any negative juice on this one up to -165. Last piece of it, if you're looking for apples to apples comps, Indiana against pocket passers, which that's what Carson Beck is. Illinois' Luke Altmaier sacked 7 times, negative 27 yards is what he finished with. Ohio State's Julian Sang sacked 5 times, negative 29. And even Ryan Brown from Purdue, who they didn't sack in the game, he only finished with 3 yards total. So I think it's very unlikely that he even gets to double digits in a perfect game scenario. I think the game script is actually going to work against him for the first time because the majority of this playoff run, they've either been tied or playing with the lead. They've only trailed for about 12 minutes the entire time during their run. I think that changes here. I think they're going to trail for much of the second half. And passing down situations, that's when Indiana's going to pin their ears back and get to Beck.
Like it. Duck, you're trying to steal some of Sean's thunder and going with a special teams prop. What do you got?
Yeah, and I don't know that this one is appropriately priced. Our friends over at DK have the total combined successful field goal attempts at 2.5, and the over is plus 150. We've already talked about Indiana's red zone defense this season, but Indiana's red zone offense has had to settle for 13 red zone field goals this year. Miami the same. So you've got combined 26 registered red zone field goals by the offenses here. I don't think we're going to get into a game flow script specifically early where teams want to take a lot of high risk, high reward gambles in the red zone. I think you'll see points at a premium with what we talked about with the under. And I think that these teams will be kicking field goals in the red zone. You'll always have the end to half situation where there's kind of a mayday field goal opportunity. And then in the end of the game situation, if this plays out how many people think so, the field goal could be in play either by Indiana to try to go up by double digits, or if Miami needs to keep the field goal in play to get it back to one score late. I just think we'll see situations where the field goal will be an appetizing play here. And so you get a combined successful field goals made of just 2.5, and the over is plus 150. I think that's worth a stab.
Hey, Duck, real quick. Brendan Frankie, the specialist for Indiana, who's also their long kicking, go-to man. He had a 58-yarder early this season against Oregon. He is going to play in this game. So if there's an opportunity, as you just mentioned, end of half situation, why not just have a walk-off kick before you go to the locker room? He has the leg to get it there.
I
All
love
right,
it.
I'm going to go with Fernando Mendoza under rushing yards. Talked about this last week. I forget what week it is. Last week on the podcast, said I'd play it down to like 15 and a half, which is still out there. Come down a bit, but look, he averaged right around 18 and a half, 19 per game during the regular season and the playoffs. But you have to keep in mind, Indiana played an extremely easy schedule in terms of teams and their adjusted sack rates. Now you're going up against Miami, who was top five in that department. I think there's a really good chance that Mendoza gets sacked a couple more times than usual. And if you look at the 4 games that he played against teams that rank in the top 40 in sack rate, and by the way, one of them was Old Dominion, who racks up those sacks with a fairly easy schedule. He was sacked 12 times and he had 23 total rushes for 26 yards. You can go back to the Wisconsin game. He was sacked 5 times, finished with negative 24 rushing yards. Even Alabama, who is not elite at getting pressure, not in the top 40 in sack rate, right? He was sacked 2 times, had 8 carries for 16 yards. Go back to Illinois, who got to him a couple times, 4 rushing yards. Ohio State got to him 3 times. He finished with 5 rushes for negative 3 yards. So I think Miami is going to take advantage of the right side of the offensive line, get to Mendoza a few more times. He was only sacked 22 times on the year, so a little over, close to 1.5 per game. I think they might get to him about 3 times here. And this Miami defense has been elite against opposing quarterbacks in the run game. They gave up 14 total rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks this season on 127 attempts. Obviously, includes sacks, which is a big part of this formula. And it's not like they didn't play mobile quarterbacks. I mean, they just saw Chambliss. They played Marcel Reed in the playoffs, Tommy Castellanos, Byron Brown, who rushed for over 1,000 yards. They played a number of them. I mean, Byron Brown had 13 rushes for 2 yards in the game. This is a guy who can run on anybody. There was a number of quarterbacks that went over this number, including Reed. Reed got the 27 yards. It took 15 attempts. Mendoza's not going to be running that often, so I see him getting sacked a few more times than usual, and this staying under. Speaking of props, let's bring in the prop master, Sean Koerner. Sean, what's going on, brother?
What's up?
I saw that NFL, you had that Drake Thomas tackle at the end of a blowout. That was brutal.
Yeah. Ooh, oh, I lost four bets this weekend by a half, including that Caleb Williams, that 4th and 10 where he was what,
Then I
26
saw that. Then
yards
it led to
behind.
the attempts that came in
I
overtime.
yeah, I had under 19 and a half completions. That was his 19th completion. So if that just, goes incomplete, I cashed that. So that allowed them to go to overtime and complete, a few more passes to clear that.
Yeah. Well, let's hope you have a little better luck tonight and things you get a couple bounces that you're probably due for after this weekend. Let's start with a touchdown prop. What do you like tonight?
Yeah. Yeah, I like CJ Daniels of Miami to score here at plus 280. And I'm only projecting Carson Beck to throw for 1.2 touchdowns, which is, right in line with the market. So it's not like I'm projecting him for 3 touchdowns or anything. And, Malachi Tony is the clear favorite to score among Miami's pass catchers. But I'm right in line with him being around plus 160. But I think Daniels is sneaky at this price. Just really solid underlying metrics, especially recently. He has an 88% routes run rate these last 3 games, 21% target rate. And of course, he scored, 7 touchdowns in just 12 games this season. Hurricanes are 7.5 point dogs tonight, so it should be a rare trailing, more pass heavy game script for Miami. So after all that, I'm projecting him closer to plus 220 here. So love the price here at plus 280.
This is also an Indiana defense that is so well schooled, and their scout is usually flawless. So you got to imagine that they're going to be fully prepared for Tony and any of the screen looks. I mean, how many times has he scored this year, and even in the playoffs on some of those wide receiver screens? Indiana is going to be fully focused on taking him out of the equation as much as possible. So that could open up some opportunities for Daniels as well. If it is a more pass heavy game script in a trailing state, that might lead to fewer rush attempts, especially for Brown, and you like his under.
Yeah, I got to join you guys with yet another rushing under. Marty Brown under 25 and a half rushing yards. Kind of as I was saying with Daniels, this is going to be a rare, potentially rare trailing game script for Miami. They only lost 2 games this year. The most they've lost this year was by 6 points against SMU. So just expecting less rushing volume overall for both backs, Fletcher Jr. and Brown. Plus, this is just a brutal matchup against Indiana. They've allowed the 7th lowest yards per rush, and Brown hasn't been that efficient all season. 3.9 yards per carry. Longest run on the season is just 13 yards. So just a brutal combination of, probably going to be inefficient tonight with just less volume to go around. So projecting his median about 4 yards lower, right around 21, with about a 62% chance he stays under 25 and a half rushing yards.
Like that. And then, of course, we can't let you go without giving us a punter prop.
Yeah.
What's on your radar?
Well, yeah, I noticed there were some punter props out there, so couldn't help myself. Usually give out, one or two of these for the Super Bowl. So, love the fact that there's some out there for this game. But gonna go with Mitch McCarthy of Indiana, his longest punt to be under 48 and a half yards. He's only averaged 40 and a half yards per punt this season, which ranked 121st out of 141 qualified punters. Very low hang time, 0 touchbacks on the season. So, he's just trying to angle kicks, not really trying to boom it most of the time. Only 3 of his 32 punts have even cleared this. I am projecting him to punt a little bit more tonight, right around 4 times. But he would need to punt about 6 times for this to be closer to coin flip. So I have him staying out of this about 68% of the time.
Love it. Also, going back to the Brown under in big, he's not the feature back, and in big games, right? Especially the last game of the season, you can see teams sometimes just leaning in to the primary guy more
Yep.
frequently, right? It's like it's the last game. We don't have to worry about next week,
Yeah.
about rotation, right? Do you find any merit in that?
Yeah, I do. We kind of saw that last night, right, with Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, where Corum was, mixing in a ton down the stretch. But, last night in crunch time, they gave Kyron a couple more drives. So we could see that dynamic tonight with Miami.
All right, good stuff, Sean. We're going to use your CJ Daniels touchdown as the first leg of our same game parlay. Calabrese, what do you want to throw in there?
I'm going to put in the under. I still like it at 46.5. One added element. Xavier Lucas, the cornerback for Miami, unfortunately suspended for the first half of this game because of a late targeting call against Ole Miss. I think that's going to create a few more instances where Heatherman is going to play this a little bit more conservative, not necessarily leave his corners, who could be a true freshman, by the way, in the mix. He's not going to leave them on islands against Surratt and against Charlie Becker. So with that in mind, I think even if Indiana is able to move the football, they're going to have to earn it. It's going to have to be closer to double-digit play drives, and we're going to see fewer explosives. So in terms of the first half, I think that's also going to benefit us to be able to get home to the window with an under.
Duck, what do you want to throw in here?
Let's go Charlie Becker over 2.5 receptions. He has become such a reliable pressure release valve for Mendoza. All the attention gets given to Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt. But in situations where Indiana really had to have it, you talk about the game against Penn State where they came back and the Big Ten championship game against Ohio State. He had at least 6 catches in each of those games and over 100 yards in each one. He's got a great catch radius. Charlie Becker does. Has exquisite hands. He'll go over the middle and make tough catches on third down. I think that he will be a guy that will exceed his receiving prop total in this game. At least 3 catches. I would assume he'd go for 4 or 5 tonight.
A little sprinkle, 60-1 on MVP, offensive MVP for Charlie Becker. What do you think, Duck?
I mean, the guy can make plays, and we saw that catch he made in the Rose Bowl. With again, there's going to be a lot of attention given to the other two, so I could see him going off if he were to have 8 or 9 catches, 130 yards, and a score or two. Yeah, I could see a path to that happening.
Yeah, I mean his hands, I mean his contested catch ability is unbelievable. And he
Exquisite.
like late in the year, and you got to remember this Indiana offense didn't like Surratt was hurt for a bit. They didn't have, Becker really wasn't part of the equation early in the season, and his ability to stretch the field and make those contested catches has just added another dimension that makes it even more difficult to defend this well-balanced Indiana offense. And by Calabrese, one other thing on that on the under that we like, right? This is not your traditional fast track that you see a lot in the college football playoff, right? Grass, open air, and historically unders have been very kind to bettors at Hard Rock. But I'll throw in as the final leg, Surratt anytime touchdown, right around even money. All this guy does is score touchdowns. He scored the last time he didn't score a touchdown against an FBS opponent was in August. It's almost February. He scored in 10 straight games against FBS teams, 15 total. The back shoulder throw that him and Mendoza have down to a science is unguardable. They just find ways to get him open with pick plays and traffic in the red zone down by the goal line. I think he finds pay dirt once again. So we got Daniels and Surratt to get in the end zone, Becker over 2.5 catches, and the full game under pays about 41-1 at DraftKings. Thank you to Duck and Mike for joining me, as well as Sean Koerner. Thanks to our producers on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. That will do it for BBOC this season for college football. However, we're not going anywhere. This is now officially a college basketball betting preview show. We've already had episodes going on. If you haven't checked them out already, make sure you do so. I'll be joining the fold. All of us here will continue to preview college basketball through the national championship. So can't wait to dive into even more hoops. Hope to see you there. But thanks again for tuning in all season. Good luck on the national title. Shout to DraftKings. We'll see you later this week for some hoops action. Cheers.